Hi, this is Paul from finishYourSong.com, and we're continuing with our series of videos looking at drums in Cubase. What you sometimes find when you come to mix a drum kit that's been recorded live is that you either don't like the tone of some of the drums, or you don't think they've been recorded as well as they could have been. And what would be good to do would be to augment the recorded sound with a sample, or alternatively replace it altogether. There are software plugins in the marketplace that will do it for you. The Slate Trigger is an example of this, but Cubase has that functionality built in, so we don't need to go off buying third-party plugins when we can do it ourselves. What we have here is an example of a song where I felt that the recorded kick and snare could do with some moral support, for want of a better term. But what I had to do first was to extract the hit points from the recorded samples. This is the song as it ended up. It's already there by Graham Cochran, and you can find a mix for this piece of music on my SoundCloud page. And I'll put a link in the notes as well. So what I did was I took the recorded kick and snare, extracted the hit point information, assigned it to MIDI notes using the MIDI mapping that I knew existed for the kit that I was going to use, and then created a MIDI track with those notes on it. That's fine and dandy. You can stop watching now if you know how to do that. But for those of us who don't, I'm just going to show you how I did the kick. So what you do is you double click on your audio part and you go into hit points, to edit hit points. As you can see, this is the sample as it was recorded, and when you go into hit points it puts all the hit points in for you. Then what you want to adjust is the threshold. You can see these lines here, and that shows you the hit points that it will gather up. So as you reduce the threshold, it begins to put those slices in for you. And at the point when you've got down and you think you've gathered up all those MIDI notes that you want, and you can see it's pretty much got them all. The place to watch is where you get multiple notes together or occasionally quiet notes. You can do a number of things. You can slice it up, you can create a groove. Groove quantizing is something I'll come back to in a future series of videos, but the important thing for us is to create MIDI notes. And you can either fix the velocity, or you can have dynamic velocity based on the velocity of the original notes. You pick the pitch that you want, the length of the MIDI notes that it will create, and where you're going to put them. Generally, I'd go for a new MIDI track. And in this case we know that the kick drum is C1, so we'll extract that to a new MIDI track and we click OK. If we just come out, we should scroll down now and find here we have a kick MIDI at the bottom of our screen. If we just open that up, you'll see that we have a whole bunch of hit points that have been assigned for us. You can of course map this. And what I did was I did that process for the kick and the snare, and then I copied one up on top of the other like that and simply glued them together using the glue tool. I'm not going to do that here because I don't want to upset my pre-arranged MIDI track. We'll just delete that altogether. Go back to this. So in here we have the kick and snare, and I'd assigned them to an Easy Drummer voice. I'm using the Americana kit. Graham's song is very much a straightforward, no-frills song. It's built around a single guitar. So I didn't want to get into using a voicing that was unsympathetic to that. So having glued the two parts together, what I ended up with was this. And as you can see, we've got the kick drum there on C1 and the snare drum there on D1. And we've also got all the varying dynamic levels from having exported them using the dynamic export. What I did with the EZdrummer was to assign only the kick and snare in the output. I've looked previously at how to assign multiple outputs from EZdrummer, and if we go into our VST instrument rack, we can edit EZdrummer. One of the things you'll notice is that it's only using 54 meg of memory, and that's because all the voicings apart from the kick and snare I've set to none, so it hasn't loaded any samples that I don't need. And if you're running short on resources when you're using the EZdrummer or a similar sampler, it's worth looking at how you can minimize the amount of samples it loads into memory. But here we've got the kick and the snare. Close that down. The kick and the snare are running through their own channel in the mix console, and then they're routed as well through the drum parallel compression track. So what I'm going to do to finish off is I'm going to play the kick and snare as they sound in the original recording as I'd mixed them, and then I'm going to add in the kick and snare from the Americana kit. It gives them a little bit of edge, a little bit of beef, and I think you'll see the difference. And so with that, I'll say until next time, take care of yourselves.